Every once in a while, I come across a piece of art, whether it be a sculpture, the lyrics to a song, or in this case a film, that resonates so deep within my bones that I feel as if someone else had had my thoughts before me. And when you see someone acting like you can't help but to pay attention and learn. Watching Poor Things was a very familiar experience. Never mind the fact that I'm not a woman with the brain of a little girl, or a regular one for that matter. The connection I felt to the experiences and discoveries that Bella, the main character, undergoes throughout the film were profound and deeply personal, especially when it related to the exploration of sexuality. It was during those scenes where Bella would reason as freely as a child and confront the standards of society with a youthful rebellion we all possess at various points in our lives, and yet, most of us lose once we realize the world is a much more complex place than it looks. These standards, set in place arbitrarily by the elders of the past, paint an image of sexuality much darker, shameful, and void of connection than what I believe the film is depicting, and to what I've come to know. The why? That is a topic far longer than I can begin to imagine. Therefore, we are going to let the professionals tackle that video essay. I will just focus on the simple stuff. For those of you who haven't watched Poor Things or need a refreshment on its plot, I linked the movie synopsis in the description. Go watch that and come back, although it's not necessary for you to follow along. It is my belief that sexuality should be seen as nothing more than another slate on the very long list of physical needs, dare I say biological, that succumb most humans. Why then are we so weird about it? A lot of the population act as if having sex were somehow immoral, or something that should be necessarily preceded by a romantic bond, a month of dating, and a promise ring. I've never heard of anyone say that taking a leak is dirty or immoral, and I certainly have never heard of anyone refusing a nice, charming, and high-earning toilet just because it's in a public place, and someone else might have been there before. The mental hurdles society has placed on sexuality are ludicrous. And Poor Things takes the alternative route. It looks at sexuality as nothing more than a need, one that can be beautiful, deep, and some might even say spiritual, but also extremely void of any emotion, used purely as a way to relieve tension or some other repressed feelings and ailments. These, may I say, very honest depictions of sexuality led me to analyze my own sexual practices and beliefs as soon as I got home from the theater. And despite the fact that chances are my views on these topics will change at some point, I am very satisfied with the list of findings I was able to come up with. This is Desexualizing Sexuality. 1. Sexual exploration of oneself is a must. It's finally happening. You're in high school or college, depending on how religious your family was, and about to lose your virginity. But there's a problem. You don't really know how to properly please yourself, let alone another person. So what do? You go back to the drawing room. In order to have a better relationship with sexuality, we must first get to know ourselves and our bodies properly. But for some of us, this type of carnal pleasure may create conflicting thoughts. We need to remember there is no shame in pleasuring oneself. There is also no need or reason to feel guilty about it, unless you're one of those public masturbators, in which case, please get help. For most other scenarios, if your body craves 4 cinnamon rolls a day, give it 4. Life's too short to not do the things that make us happy. I personally felt guilty and dirty about my sexuality for a long time, which led me down a dark rabbit hole. Luckily, I was able to meet people who had much healthier relationships with their own sexuality and learn from them and their realizations. Seeing Bella explore her body with carelessness and joy made me remember once again how innocent and natural our sexuality really is. The other benefit is that the more you explore your body and your sexual turn-ons, the easier it will be to guide your future counterpart through communication to the promised land. When you know where you're going, people tend to follow. 2. Communication is hot. Sex can be very intimidating, especially when starting out. The pressure to live up to your risky, kinky-ass texts can feel overwhelming, especially when you weren't expecting to deliver on them. But sometimes life calls you out. 5 minutes into the pet plant conversation and you get down to business. You had a great round 1, but you want to make round 2 even better. So, communicate when necessary. Try to keep it brief though. There's plenty of time to talk in between rounds or on the get to know each other section at the end credits scene. If something feels wrong or really good, say something. Want something done? Ask. Words they can say is no. Don't forget the quietest mouth sometimes doesn't get fed. Above all else, we must be respectful of the likes, dislikes, and boundaries of our sexual partners and our own. On a final note, any kind of communication can be a very arousing part of sex, and you should consider using it more often if you want to add a little bit of spice. Think of Barney Stinson as a great example of communicating during intimate moments. It's how you say it, not what you say. Samantha from Sex and the City is also a great communicator. She's also basically the OG Barney. But for everyone's sake, please keep it honest. 3. Take action and always take notes. Sexual pleasure is a subject of infinite possibilities, and that means the odds are we are not alone, no matter how it may seem. If there is something the rise of online porn has taught us, besides the obvious and conflicting distortions of sex, is that no matter how quote-unquote weird something may sound, there's people into it. Now, there are exceptions like the cousin thing in Alabama or like Monterrey, Mexico. Legality and consent are a must, which should go without saying, but apparently not. So from sucking toes to ass eating, if you're down, go down. On the taking notes side, being open to the other person's likes and wants is always a rewarding experience. Turns out the Bible was right. Sometimes it is more blessed to give than to receive. And believe me, it is. Think of each person as a game of chess. There are a certain set of moves that work in any situation. But at the end of the day, it comes down to your opponent, in this case, your sexual partner. If you want to check your mate, your strategy will most likely have to shift at least a little, sometimes in directions you had never gone before. Chances are what you learn will come in handy at some point. It's like getting a software update, certainly some extra RAM. 4. Practice makes perfect. Just like anything else in life, the only way to get better at sex is to do it as often as possible. In the morning, after lunch, at night. Do you think Stephen Curry stopped practicing after making a single three-pointer? Do you think Caitlin Clark stopped? No. They kept practicing like madmen or madwoman until their shot was wet as hell. And if that's not the perfect analogy, I don't know what is. I know having quality sex is easier said than done, regardless of gender, but sex is like anything else. There's amazing, awful, and everything in between. The good news is that the more you practice, the easier it gets to recognize cues pointing to the right type of person for you. Aim to have sex once a month and watch your back get deeper. Eventually, just like in anything else in life, we develop our own very sexual personality, full of kinks and special talents, an alter ego of sorts, if you will, that is free to express its physical and psychological desires freely and skillfully. However, please remember to practice safe sex, whatever that means to you. 5. Sex is supposed to be intimate. Deal with it. Just as empty calories are the biggest detriment to our physical health, empty sexuality is the biggest detriment to the sexual interactions of our time. Which basically means that you shouldn't eat if you're not hungry. One thing we ought to remember is that sex is the most intimate of acts, far more complex than our other needs, psychologically at least. Rightfully, this can make letting someone mix their energy and essence with yours feel very overwhelming. And that is overlooking the fact that being naked represents our most essential selves, the ones stripped of possessions and superfluousness. This fear of being seen, of connection, can lead us down a path of overcompensation, resulting in purely physical interactions that lack intimacy, therefore disregarding the energetic bond that originates from sex. It is also important to differentiate between being sexually active and using sex as a social crutch. Having sex doesn't necessarily correlate to a healthy sex life. Healthy sexual activity is no easy feat. But in my opinion, the best way to ensure a healthy quality fuck is to genuinely connect with the person emotionally. It can be a shared sense of humor, a hobby, maybe similar childhoods, and emotional connection can emerge even between complete opposites. The gist is, sex becomes 10 times better when there's a connection that allows everyone involved, wink wink, to be their most authentic selves. When I look back at my 19-year-old virgin self, who oddly enough wanted to be celibate till marriage, I think he would be proud of how far our sexual journey has taken us. There's been ups and downs, but the way my character and emotional intelligence have developed as a result of every sexual interaction is pretty much invaluable. I know these 5 advice sound very obvious, but most good advice tend to be. I'll leave you with this: having a healthy, fun, and an active sex life is possible. It is not easy nor hard, but complex, and the way to navigate those complexities can only be learned through practice, analyzation, and brown-nosing in the most literal way. In the end, all I hope to accomplish here is to share some of the guidelines that I've created for myself in order to satisfy the physical part of my sexual needs without sacrificing the emotional one. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again.